First bit. The first time I met His Holiness the Dalai Lama, I was invited to ask him one question. He tends to go on and on, his people told me, so one question only. I was interviewing His Holiness for a magazine column I wrote, which I explored ways to have a better life. The column was one of my smarter orchestrations. Anxiety-related illness had planted me in a spot such that I was too sick to hold down a normal job and too broke to get the healing treatments I needed. So I confected a gig where I tested different ways to heal myself. 2 birds, 1 stone. I deliberated for days. How would I reduce things to the question that would provide a salve to all us Westerners seeking a more meaningful path through the foggy, constipated, heart-sinky angst of life? The choice left my head spinning and chattering. What is it exactly that we need to know? Are we here to evolve into higher beings? Why are we so alone? Is there a grand scheme to our allotted 85 years? When we met a few weeks later, His Holiness kisses my hand and tosses his thongs aside. We sink into adjacent hotel room lounge chairs. I still don't have my one question. So I ask the most authentically pressing thing in that exact moment. How do I get my mind to shut up? You know, to stop the fretty chatter that makes us so nervous and unsettled and unable to grasp the present moment at the end of yoga classes when the instructor talks about it as though it's something you can buy off a shelf. His Holiness giggles and blows his nose on a paper serviette, shoving it down the front of his robe like my Year 4 teacher used to. There's no use, he tells me. Silly, impossible to achieve. If you can do it, great. If not, big waste of time. But surely you can do it, I say. I mean, is the Pope a Catholic? Can the Dalai Lama still his mind? No. If I sit in a cave for a year on a mountain, then maybe I can do it. But no guarantee. He waves his hand. Anyway, I don't have time. He has better things to do, he tells me, like teaching altruism to massive crowds around the world. His Holiness then tells me about his recent trip to Japan, how he hits the running machine at 3 a.m. every day, and all about his anger issues. Yes, the Dalai Lama gets cranky. But he says nothing further about the torturous human experience of having a fretful, frenzied mind that trips along ahead of us, just beyond our grip, driving us all mad, and leaving us thinking we've got it all terribly wrong. It was as if the subject bored him. I leave feeling deflated and anxious. I didn't exactly have a pearly sight for my column, but a few days later I was defending his seemingly flaccid response to my close mate Ragnai, and I realised what His Holiness had done. He'd given me a response that came with a screaming cap-lettered subtext, "You're okay as you are." He'd given me and everyone else out there whose whirring thoughts keep them awake until 4 a.m. trash-talking their poor souls into agitated despair a big, fat, red-robed hug. It was perfect. Now, a strange thing happens when you realise that some gargantuan, all-looming issue you've been fretting over no longer needs to be fixed. You take a deep, free breath, expand a little, release your grip, and get on with better things. I suspect you might be reading these words here because you're a fretter with a mind that goes too fast, too high, too unbridled. And like me, you have tried everything to fix this fretting, because fretters try really, really hard at everything. They also tend to think they need fixing. And like me, you might have wondered if there's another way. I'd like to say this up front. I write these very words because I've come to believe that you can be fretty and chattery in the head and awake at 4 a.m. and trying really hard at everything. And you can get on with having a great life. Hey, the Dalai Lama told me so. Actually, I'll go a bit further. I've come to believe that the fretting itself can be the very thing that plonks you on the path to a great life. When God was handing out the guidebook to life, I was on the toilet, or hanging out nappies for Mum. I was, I believe, the only person on the planet who missed out. The first time this realization came crashing down on me, I was 15. Crouching in an Asian-style squat behind a curtain in a Canberra shopping mall, waiting to see if I'd won the inaugural Face of Miss GB's modelling competition. A few months earlier, a matronly fitting room attendant had stopped me as I flicked through her bra rack and asked if she could take a photo with her point and click. Yeah, okay, I said, and half smiled, half frowned for the camera. I got a letter 2 weeks later inviting me to attend the finals being held at the mall's centre stage. Up for grabs was a modelling contract, a Dolly magazine shoot, and a brown knickers package. The other finalists chat and laugh as we wait for the judge's announcement. They're glossy and cheerleadery and all seem to be wearing the same best and less stilettos and black lycra micro dresses that they keep adjusting over their bottoms, but without bending over, because to do so would muck up their hair-sprayed cliff fringes, a few strands combed forward over their eyes. I hadn't got the Robert Palmer memo. I'm wearing an ankle-length white poly-cotton peasant dress with beige slouch socks and worn tan sports girl brogues with splits in the soles. It's a bit Linda Kozlowski in Crocodile Dundee, a little bit out of Africa. I'd borrowed the dress from a girl at school and I'd carefully hand-stitched the princess line seams in a few centimetres to fit. Dad added the slits in my shoes and dried them on the hot water tank overnight. I'm feeling nervous, and oh boy, so terribly alone. Also, this had just happened. On my second run on the catwalk for the Saturday morning shopping crowd, I'd spun in front of the judges. All eyeballs were on me. And then, time seemed to stop, and the world went silent like it does just before a bushfire. And then, a tightly packed wad of toilet paper dropped from under my dress and landed with a light right in front of the judges. As an awkwardly underdeveloped teen, I'd do this thing where I'd stuff tissue or toilet paper into the sides of my underpants to give me hips where I had none. I wore jeans mostly, and would stick the toilet paper in the pockets, wash them, and then bake them out in the sun, creating papier-mâché Insta-curves. I'd also wear 2, sometimes 3 t-shirts at a time, rolling the sleeves up over each other, and football socks with ankle boots to bulk out my undersized frame. I was an optical illusion of womanly shape that had to be carefully, anxiously constructed each morning. From the back of the crowd, Dad whooped, "You little beauty," like he did at sports carnivals when my brothers and sister and I ran into the home straight, no matter our placing in the pack. I scampered off behind the curtain. Was I mortified? Ashamed? No. This wasn't the issue. The ordeal had instead triggered a panic, an overwhelming and lonely panic of the most fundamental kind. I was breathless and alert in the car on the way home with my second-place brown knickers package, entirely unanchored, dangerously adrift. In this moment, I fully believed that I didn't get it. I didn't get life, and everyone else on the planet did. They'd got the guidebook. They got the missive that showed them how to interject in a jokey conversation. They got the instructions for choosing the right career path. They seemed to somehow know why we existed. Shit, how am I going to get through this thing called life? But one of the dear things about getting older is that it does eventually dawn on you that there is no guidebook. One day it suddenly emerges. No one bloody gets it. None of us know what we're doing. The thing is, we all put a lot of effort into looking like we did get the guide, that of course we know how to do this caper called life. We put on a smile rather than tell friends we are desperately lonely, and we make loud, verbose claims at dinner parties to make everyone certain of our certainty. We're funny like that. Stephen Fry wrote in the Fry Chronicles that behind the mask of security, ease, confidence, and assurance I wear, so easily that its features often lift into a smirk that looks like complacency and smugness, is the real condition of anxiety, self-doubt, self-disgust, and fear in which much of my life then and now is lived. 2 things about this. Thing 1, it's the most incredible relief to know that we're all wearing masks, and to see them slip on others. Oh, sweet Jesus, we're not alone. We're in this together. It's not a mean-spirited schadenfreude, it's the ultimate connection. Really, it is. My butte and brutally frank mate Rick rang and asked me one morning, "Darl, why exactly are you writing this book?" "Because I can't help it, and because I'm sick of being lonely," I replied. Then I quoted something I'd read that morning from philosopher Alain de Botton's The Book of Life. We must suffer alone, but we can at least hold out our arms to similarly tortured, fractured, and above all else anxious neighbours, as if to say, in the kindest way possible, "I know." "Good," Rick said, and hung up. Thing 2. When you realise there's no guidebook, an opportunity suddenly presents itself. If no one knows what they're doing, if there's no right way to do life, then we can surely choose our own way, yes? My beautiful brother Ben recently asked me over the phone, "Remember that time you got stuck on a bus because of that woman's perfume?" Nope, but if Ben, the family elephant, said it happened, it did. Ben's 16 months younger than me, and I realise just now that he's been my ballast over the years with his gruff, "Sarah, just don't worry about it," sturdiness, the Mindy to my mock. Apparently I was so distressed by the stench from the lady sitting next to me, I'd covered my face and missed several bus stops. Perfume has always made me anxious. I was 6. I've been anxious for a long, long time. I don't know when or how it kicked in, but I don't remember a time without it. I was diagnosed with childhood anxiety and insomnia at 12, then bulimia in my late teens, then obsessive-compulsive disorder shortly thereafter, then depression and hypomania, and then, in my early 20s, manic depression, or bipolar disorder as it's now called. I've seen about 36 psychiatrists and psychotherapists and spiritual healers, generally twice a week, for years at a time. I was medicated from 17 until I was 28 with anti-epileptic, anti-anxiety, and antipsychotic drugs. I've waded through CBT, NLP, hypnotherapy, Freudian analysis, spiritual coaching, and sand play. For long, lonely slabs, I've had to step out of the slipstream of life, missing school, dropping out of university twice, quitting jobs, and unable to leave the house for up to a year at a time, also twice. I can now tell you it was all anxiety, all of it, just different flavors. But at 27, I decided to go my own way. I was living in Melbourne, writing restaurant reviews and celebrity features for the Sunday paper. I also wrote a weekly opinion column. I'd write it Thursday night and had the most marvellous time under the pump, with an outlet for my thoughts on homeless people, feminism, and the reasons why men always power walk in pairs. I'd recently split from my first boyfriend, and was living with a fun artist in a South Yarra terrace that was to be demolished in coming months. We wrote on the walls, ivy grew through the kitchen, we cooked stew, and I was on a conscious mission to explore sex. I came to sex late and had only had one sexual partner. I was ready to play. It was fun to experiment, and one not based on pain or compromise. Things felt aligned and touched by some rip and flow. And so I broke up with the psychiatrist who was my last for a very long time. I presented her with a dot-pointed rationale of why I had to go my own way. I am ready, I told her. This is the real thing, now. Life ain't no run-up, a dress rehearsal, I said. I'm ready for the work. It's just hard work, right? I can do hard work. It's a matter of firing the fuck up. She shook my hand as I left her dimly lit office overlooking Melbourne's Albert Park. I appreciate now that I was probably riding a slightly manic upswing. 6 months later, I had used up the last of my medications. They'd run out one by one, and I'd simply chosen not to repeat the prescriptions. Despite appearances, this was not a monumental fork in the road, never turn back moment. That's the thing with my important life moments. They always seem to emerge slowly, like a Polaroid picture. I suspect few people have instant capture aha moments, especially those of us ensconced in the nebulous realm of anxiety, where discernible lines between normal and neurotic cease at some point to exist. That said, I think my adult journey, the one I'm sharing in this book you're holding, began as I left my psychiatrist's office on that late autumn morning. I remember the soft light. I remember doing a fist pump as I walked to the tram stop. I was making up my own rules for managing what everyone insisted on calling an illness, and I knew I was ready to live them out. I get asked how I did this. I can only say that I chose. I made the decision and then I committed, motivated predominantly by the fact that, frankly, nothing else had worked. I've spoken to a lot of functioning neurotics over the years, and they tell me the same. You choose. You might not even know why, but you do. You commit, then you do the work. Oh yeah, and then you falter and fuck up and go back to the beginning. In my mid-30s, my mania flared again, and my obsessive-compulsive disorder. I've wrestled with OCD since I was 11 or 12. I've had to tap things and check things and wash my hands to a count of 3. It's a nighttime ritual only. I tap light switches and doors and bathroom taps after everyone has gone to bed, and I check to a count of 3 in multiples of 3 for things under my bed. As a kid, I counted pretty much everything in 3s. Cracks, strips, turnings of my pillow to the cool side when I couldn't sleep. I know when I'm getting worse. My counting goes from sets of 3s to 4s and 5s. At 35, I was also suicidal for the second time in my life. I was unable to leave the house or to work for 9 months. Everything unraveled again. I've since gone back to therapists. I've gone back to medication and then gone off it again. I have anxiety attacks in batches through the year. I keep Valium in my bathroom, just in case. But this journey is what I do now. I bump along in fits and start on a perpetual path to finding better ways for me and my mate anxiety to get around. It's everything I do. As someone wrote to me on my blog a few years ago, Sarah, you're all striving, no arriving. Yes, and I think this is the point. I've written more than 1,500 posts on my personal blog and hundreds, if not thousands, of agonized over columns for 11 different magazines and newspapers over a 22-year writing career, in which I try out different ideas and life hacks, all geared in one way or another at what? Understanding my anxiety? It's been a rather self-serving career trajectory. Where do I land? Modern medicine has certainly preferred dealing with my various conditions as individual diagnoses. The bipolar, the anxiety attacks, the obsessive-compulsive disorder, the insomnia, as well as the host of autoimmune diseases I've developed along the way. And never shall thy psychiatrist and endocrinologist meet. But me, I think all the diagnoses boil down to anxiety. That is, an itchy sense that things are not right, a buzzing disease. Whatever doctors want to call it, the feeling is the same. It's that gut-twisting, grip from behind, heart-sinky feeling that winds me in tighter spirals and makes everything go faster with so much urgency. And soon I'm running down a steep hill faster than my poor spinning legs can carry me. I'm aware many doctors disagree with this notion, and I could indeed be wrong, but I reckon it's time we explored the idea. It's time we had the conversation, because I think many of us are feeling the itchiness of something missing from the issue. My qualifications for writing this book then, if it matters to you, is that I'm a committed striver. I'm strapped in, doing the work and keen to start the conversation. I should also point out that I don't have an answer to any of this. You should probably know this 11 pages in. This book doesn't take a linear path to salvation. No, it meanders through a series of explorations. I take off my mask and share my not knowing. But dear, dear reader, I ask you, do you feel in your heart of hearts that fixing your anxiety is the answer? I ask this of anyone with the kind of low to medium anxious buzz we're all feeling, as well as those of you with a diagnosed anxious condition, because the question is equally relevant. Do you think it might be lovelier if we bundle up our uncertainty, fear, late-night overthinking and kooky coping habits, tuck them gently under our arm and see where they take us? This might not sound like the most grab a highlighter and mark out the wisdoms premise for a book, but let's see how it goes. The Journey by Mary Oliver goes straight to it. I don't generally like long quotes and poems in books. They clutter the flow, but please do yourself a favour and read it in full, and absorb it so we can all start on the right note. The Journey. One day you finally knew what you had to do and began. Though the voices around you kept shouting their bad advice, though the whole house began to tremble and you felt the old tug at your ankles. Mend my life, each voice cried. But you didn't stop. You knew what you had to do. Though the wind pried with its stiff fingers at the very foundations, though their melancholy was terrible. It was already late enough, and a wild night, and the road full of fallen branches and stones. But little by little, as you left their voices behind, the stars began to burn through the sheets of cloud, and there was a new voice, which you slowly recognized as your own, that kept you company as you strode deeper and deeper into the world, determined to do the only thing that you could do, determined to save the only life that you could save. Do you reckon?